Trying to figure out where you stand on Canva? We'll walk you through how I'm thinking about the business and its growth potential as I prepare to make a call on whether I'm bullish or bearish on Canva. I'll go through what I like so far from what I'm seeing, and I'll also go through what I don't like, not really sure about. And I'm also put together some early stories and narratives that might actually really drive the call here. So, okay, let's dive in on Canva. First off, gotta say that I love the user base. I mean, you've got 220 million active monthly users, it looks like, overall. I mean, that is a lot of people that are coming to Canva and using the tool. And just as a bit of an overview, it is a design tool, right? They're trying to make design really accessible to anyone, not just people that really think about themselves as designers or putting together presentations or pamphlets, posters, really a lot of materials that can actually be put together with Canva. They're trying to make it as accessible and easy as possible for people. And I think that easy is a good sell. And there is a moat around easy. I think if you think about a lot of how products are really developed, you might have heard of the kind of concept of like 10x better or 10 times better, that you really need to have something that is considerably better than the other alternative in order to kind of really displace the product that's out there and gaining traction in the market. And because Canva is really the leader in making design accessible with such a big user base, easy is a very nice moat, and it creates this kind of very difficult to overcome aspect. If someone came out, let's say a smaller startup, somebody that's not there and present in the market now, and made something just slightly better than Canva, they'd have a really, really hard road to go down to be able to get to that point where they could really displace Canva. That's a big part of the kind of incumbency and the fact that they're early in there that is going to make this really powerful. I think there's also an element too, so I love that kind of easy. I think it's a good sell. I think it's a moaty sell with it and hard to displace. You also have to look at like how people view their relationship with design, right? I think a lot of people, especially for millennials, you have this concept that maybe certain aspects of design are you need to go to a designer for, you don't have the capabilities for it, you're not really sure how to kind of make it look right. And Canva is providing something to kind of answer that more fundamental need of like expressing yourself and getting things done, whether that's for work or for personal stuff, where you feel like, okay, this looks good, this is something I can kind of feel proud of. So pretty interesting relationship that people have with design, and I think it's very much aligned with how Canva markets itself and kind of their position in the market of making it really easy and accessible for people. I also think that like size for Canva with that user base, they've now crossed over into this state where they're really formidable enough that they have that kind of size and scale to them that's pretty hard to displace, but also it brings in the possibility of actually like acquiring in order to help their growth. So if there were smaller startups where they felt like, hey, this is like pretty innovative tech, we could use it, we haven't developed it ourselves, they have the scale where I think they can kind of swallow that sort of tech up and will help their business and how that moves forward. It's also a really easy business to understand overall, which I think is pretty helpful. It's got this kind of concept of you have a bunch of people that come to canva.com. A lot of people use it for free. A number of them buy subscriptions and keep using it forever. And that's a really straightforward business to understand. There's not a whole lot of complexity there. The gross margins look very good. It has a real benefit to it of you're not actually, as an investor, you're not underwriting, risks that you kind of don't really understand. Very, very straightforward. You can like that part of it. I also love the founder-led part of it. So founders are pretty heavily involved in the business. In the early days, it looks like this is still a story where they're highly engaged. They believe in the mission. That's a real positive in terms of vision and really seeing the product through and building the company and adapting to it, especially I think in this world with AI changing some of these tools and how they work. Having that perspective from founders and kind of that intuition around it, I think, is a big leg up. So a lot of reasons to be bullish on this. I have used Canva as well on odds and ends, and I kind of want to go through maybe just some of the risks that I see where I'm not sure at this point. Because of course, with investing, you want to be really confident kind of when you're making the call. And I am working towards a call on Canva, but continuing to do a lot of the research. And would love to hear from people if you agree with what I'm saying. If you disagree, comment. Subscribe and send notes in. We'll talk about it on future videos, and you'll also hear kind of what the final call on Canva will be when we come out with it. And we'll continue to follow the progression of this company. It's really pretty interesting to see how it continues to develop. So the risks that I see, and some of this is partly based off of usage that I've had, and just really like thinking about the story and how it comes together. Some of the risks that I see are like the usage can sometimes be pretty occasional. So if you feel like maybe you'd want to put together something cool for a kid's birthday party, or you want to use it for like a fundraiser for a nonprofit, or otherwise things that are kind of more occasional, not I'm sitting down and doing this like as part of my 9-to-5 job. You might have people kind of coming in and out for that, and it might lead to like a lot of free usage where if you really tried to kind of push the upsell from free, you're just not going to get it. It's not kind of important enough for people, but they're going to use it and kind of see that come through with it. So that upsell from free has me a little bit concerned, like how much can they really convert there? What is that really looking like? And the fact that the usage patterns may be pretty occasional because some of these users are more casual users, or a lot of them, in theory, millions of them would be pretty casual, that might kind of present some limitations from really growing your revenue from your existing users. And obviously with so many users out there, it becomes harder and harder to get more net new ones that have never used the tool. So that would be kind of my primary concern with it, and big risk factor that I see. The second one is really around AI outside of their kind of core competence, right? So company was started in 2012 in Australia. They've done very, very well with design and making it very accessible. How much does that skill port over towards really having a vision towards where AI is going and how to bake it into the product? They've done a good start of it from what I've seen as a user, but things are going to kind of continue to evolve, and hard to not see this as like a pretty big risk. I'm still trying to get comfortable with how much they can kind of stay on top of it, versus potentially be leapfrog. So that's where I see more of the risk sitting here, is that there is this like AI leapfrog risk. And I think it breaks down in a couple different ways. The first part is that you can kind of just through very little prompting, very little writing, or maybe by putting out certain pictures, let's say, or a mood board that you do, that others could kind of develop a product that does a lot of the design work pretty much for you, and that you get a result that you feel like is good enough, and you don't really need to go into some of Canva's tools to adjust it or modify it. That's kind of the AI leapfrog risk. Primarily is just that someone else can kind of one-shot it, or be able to kind of produce something with very little interaction. The second part, I think, is just more that AI changes where the battlefield really is. So instead of kind of more flat imagery, it becomes creativity kind of moves, because it becomes easier, to things like music, things like video. And so that those modes for creativity become more important and maybe are at the expense of Canva. That's also a risk factor here. So you'd have tools like a VO3 or Grok Imagine, for example, that might make video easier and easier to do. You have a lot of music tools coming out and maybe integrating some of that together. Maybe there are situations where just kind of what people want to create and what they feel like is possible shifts. And so even though Canva is doing really, really well on their territory and in their space, the market size kind of starts to slow a little bit because you're actually getting growth in these new areas that are using these other modalities for creativity. So I can get a little bit more comfortable on that one. Just I think when you kind of see this being maybe more of a, hey, growth is growth, and there's not necessarily a zero sum to creativity from a visual perspective of putting together materials and kind of seeing how that stuff comes together in Canva in comparison to like motion and sound. Maybe it's just more is more, but I think there is some potential there where the world just looks different in a couple years in terms of like volume of creativity and where that focus is really going. I think the other aspect I still need to get comfortable with is Adobe and its Express and Firefly moves. So what it's doing in the space. Is this like more of a winner take all moment when Adobe kind of comes in and really focuses where it needs to focus, and it seems like they've been moving? That would be really the concerns here with it, and kind of looking at Canva. So some of the concerns, some of the risk factors, trying to get comfortable with that, trying to see how to weigh that up. And I think we can talk a little bit about stories. So what are the narratives here that I think would really drive the value of the stock over time? That's something we want to look at and try to understand when we weigh it up against alternatives to invest in. So I think one of the bull cases here would be like a Shopify type platform. I've talked a lot about platforms before, but the idea that you can really take templates that creators are making using Canva and then go to Canva to actually publish those, similar to like how you would put products up, let's say on Etsy, or products up on Shopify. You would kind of create that platform if you're Canva, and then allow the creators to earn money when others are using their materials and their templates. So this could be like, let's say, for YouTube, there are all the little thumbnails that you see in front of videos. You could imagine a world where there are certain templates that are great for that, and people are kind of constantly iterating on that, and then people buy from there. I think there's potential here. I think that Canva has tried to kind of make forays in there. How much depth there really is to it, I think still open-ended there. So another narrative that you'd believe kind of in the aspect of this is kind of more of a generational one. I think if you were very bullish, you'd look at this as basically saying, there's a generational changing of the guard here. Gen X, when they were looking for design tools, that was Adobe, and Adobe came online kind of in that when Gen X was really coming into the workforce and starting to use a lot of these creative tools, or even earlier. And so they kind of had that marketing towards them. They own that kind of group and category, whereas millennial, Gen Z, Canva has kind of been able to insert itself in there. And so there's this generational changing of the guard, as Gen X is maybe not in the weeds day-to-day creating and producing as much, perhaps, just at kind of different organizations. You think about the hierarchy, getting promoted, all these sorts of things, whereas millennials, Gen Z are kind of rolling up their sleeves, and they've been doing that in Canva and using that, and so feel comfortable with that sort of tooling. There's a generational changing of the guard story here. There's also this kind of bottom-up enterprise monetization, like Slack, Zoom, being able to kind of start on the consumer side or consumer-ish side in the case of Slack, and be able to get enterprise monetization, enterprise adoption, bigger companies doing it through this kind of ground up approach, where you turn around and you realize like, oh, a lot of people are already using Canva across my team, not just in the design area, but you've got salespeople putting together quick materials for themselves, or operations folks using it in certain ways. That can be pretty interesting for it, and obviously get fast speed and growth off of it. So potentially that enterprise monetization story could come together. On the other side of things, I think you'd be worried about magical design features really just like becoming pretty commoditized. So you have like Microsoft, you'd have Google, you'd even have ChatGPT gets things that are like good enough, just good enough, not excellent, not even the same as Canva, but just good enough to get design into their products, where a lot of nine designers would kind of say like, hey, this checks a box, this is like good enough, and it was free. It basically includes like all of the stuff that I really would need to kind of like get this done for my work, or look like I've kind of done something here. And that would be a real drag, especially if these other companies kind of tack it on for free. I mean, that's the risk here, is that that a huge portion of this business could get kind of swallowed up in other sorts of competition. And it's not like this market is just huge and hiding in plain sight. It is because of Adobe. There is just a lot of focus. Adobe's got a market cap in the $200 billion plus range. Everyone is aware that like there is a big market for these types of products when it comes to design as a full suite, and so there's no real way to where to hide. And you might have even bigger hyperscalers and bigger companies go in and kind of swallow that up. There's also the risk for Adobe, which I think gets to the next one of, it could take a lot of the oxygen out of the room. It could be very difficult for Canva at some point, as they, in the enterprise, especially as they look to kind of strangle, taking more and more of the oxygen out of the room. That's where I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper, is just understand Adobe's positioning, where that really sits, and how much there really is a risk factor there. The last one is really like too many free users. I think just understanding what's the conversion between people that are just trying it out for free a couple times, or using it monthly on the again, just free, not paying. How much of a drag is that on costs? How much is that kind of really impeding what Canva can do for all of their other users? And is that conversion going to be too much of a problem? Like, it's kind of like the free parking problem. If you just give away a ton of free parking to people, hoping that people come to your store, okay, a lot of people will use that parking. How many people will come to your store? You gotta look at some of the numbers. You gotta look at some of that, but that's clearly a risk factor. Look, overall on this, I am leaning towards bullish here. I'm trying to think this through, though, if this is going to be just an average investment compared to just buying the NASDAQ index, or really is this something to really be bullish about? So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Are you bullish? Are you bearish? What did I miss? Subscribe and get more analysis on private tech